Well, good morning, everyone. I think we're getting to full capacity here, and others will join us as the morning continues here. Thanks for joining us so bright and early. Very grateful for your time. I think we've got about 450 people signed up for this one, so should be a good crowd. So my name is Claire DeLong, and I'm the Communications Director for the agency. If we haven't met before, hello. And if you joined us last time, you know that we are going to do our best to make these meetings run as smoothly as possible. But as it's a large meeting with lots of participants, I think we've all been in this virtual world long enough to know issues can crop up. So apologies for any sort of technical or life mishaps that may or may not happen. So hopefully we'll keep it on the smooth track here. So just before we get started, and I'll introduce our speakers here in a minute, just a few logistics. So the meeting, I think you just saw, is being recorded, and recorded sessions will be posted on Inside ESD for those that can't make the live events. And the agenda for this meeting, as well as recordings and all the Q&A from the last meetings, are on the agency all staff page on Inside ESD. So you can find that. We'll post the link in the chat here in a second. But there's lots of great information, and then the last meetings, if you weren't able to join us, all of the Q&A and info from that too. So today, just like last time, we'll have a combination of presentation and Q&A. And because we have so many people in these sessions, we keep everyone muted and video disabled. That just allows us to avoid more technical issues. If you're having trouble getting audio or anything like that, there is a call-in option, so you can check the meeting invite for that and dial in from your work phone if you have that option. So even though video and mics are muted, do feel free to use the chat. That is live, and we are going to be pulling questions out of that to answer. We're going to get to as many questions as we can today. We also had some pre-submitted in advance from some call-outs we did in all staff messages. So that's where the Q&A is coming from, and we're going to do as many of those as we can. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers. We've got here today four presenters, including myself. We've got Cami Feek, and she is, of course, our Commissioner for the Employment Security Department. We have Michaela Dolman, our Chief Human Resource Officer. And we have Phil Castle, our Deputy Commissioner. So they're going to share some information with you, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Cami.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everybody. This is where we find out where the morning people are, right? And I am probably one of those annoying morning people because I really do best in the AM. So sorry if you haven't had your coffee and I'm a little too much. I want to welcome you all to our all staff. I'm really thrilled that we have so many folks here and that over the last couple of days, so many have attended. I want to start with the feedback that we got from the last session. And we had well over 200 comments. And I really want to thank you for those. I read every single one of them. As some of you who may have heard me before say, I really value opportunities to learn and grow, and we heard you. There's a couple of things I want to highlight. One, we are using Zoom today. We have two collaboration software tools in the agency, and our primary tool that everybody has is Teams. And typically, we only reserve Zoom for special cases like this, where we have really large groups. Right now, with the current status of both of those, Zoom has just more developed abilities and options for being able to manage a large audience and support you all in being successful in hearing and seeing and navigating and all of that. So I wanted to start with that and let you know why we're using Zoom today. And this is really, this format, I know it would be great to see faces and hear from everybody, but this is really the best for large audiences, which is why it's structured the way it is. One thing that I saw very consistently in the comments was that you really wanted more ability to get your questions answered as you ask them in real time at the meeting. And so we are doing that today. We had originally designed it, I had designed it to follow up with all of those questions, thinking that it would be potentially more inclusive for people that couldn't attend to really do it all after. But I realized that was really challenging for the people that did attend. So we're doing a hybrid where we're going to do both. And we took that in and we are doing it different this time. So there will be people answering the chat along the way. Nick Damaris is helping with that. So keep an eye on the chat. But we'll also just call out general themes for the broader group and bring them up for an answer from one of the panelists. So we'll be doing a little bit of both, and I really, really appreciate that great feedback and am open to that. So we have a couple of topics today, and we are mostly going to focus on the vaccine requirement. And I know that that is on everybody's mind right now. And as we have moved through this pandemic, we've been figuring out how to deal with so many new and different things as we go. And the vaccine mandate has certainly created another test and challenge for us. And what I want you to know today is that we're really going to try to provide some information and allow some for some questions. I know this is a really difficult time for people. There are a wide range of feelings that people have, opinions that people have that are different. They might be different from mine. They might be different from others that they work with. What I want to be careful and clear about today is this isn't really a debate of the decision around the mandate or whether it should be or not, because the reality is Governor Inslee has made it really clear that he's not going to postpone or cancel this vaccine mandate. And he made that decision, he's sticking to it. He also made it clear in some of the answers to questions at his press conference last week that I'll pop into the chat if you're interested in seeing that yourself, that he's not going to modify it to allow any kind of test out option or anything like that. So given all of that, as the head of ESD and the agency, like all of my peers in state government, it's my responsibility to ensure we really meet this requirement. And it's my goal to provide everybody the information they need as we go to support you all in decision making and to keep the agency running. And ultimately, if someone's separated from employment, which I would hate to see, I want to make sure that we're here for them in that process. And that regardless of your decision, I want you to know you're a great person, you matter to me, and I'm here to do whatever I can to make the process easier and just walk beside you during a really, really difficult time. If you haven't decided yet if you'll be vaccinated, please find someone you trust and have the conversation. At the end of the day, being fully vaccinated is required by law for employment with the state, with the exception of a couple of exemptions that Michaela will talk about. And there's time to move forward if you haven't decided, or to change your mind if maybe originally you weren't going to get vaccinated and now you are. But you really have to act quickly. And in a couple of minutes here, Michaela will come in and talk about some details around that. I also am really asking that for the sake of your teammates, that you indicate your intentions about vaccination to HR as soon as possible. I'm sure there's some of you that might be vaccinated and still don't like the requirement and are frustrated with it. But what I ask is that you submit your vaccine records as soon as possible, and that if you are leaving, that you let us know. Our agency leadership has started contingency planning because we really want to be sure that we can continue our mission, and more than that, that we can support the people that remain at ESD after the 18th. Those people that are your coworkers today are depending on information so that we can support them. That means that if we haven't already had a conversation with you about your plans for verification, we may, and we're really going to do that with empathy and understanding for where you're at. This is really critical because I have to ensure that our operations can continue and we can serve Washingtonians. And it's possible that if you don't share your intention and it's a critical position, we may have to begin recruitment around some of those roles. And the same is true if you've told us and you plan not to get immunized. and don't have an exemption or accommodation, we really have to fill critical roles. And that means we may have to hire some folks to proceed and begin. And I want you to know, I'm really worried about losing incredible people at our agency. And I don't know if there's anything that I can help with, but I will sure try, because I care about our team and I want to support you all. I think with that, it's probably best to kick it over to Michaela, who's going to talk about some of the next steps and some of the more details around the vaccine requirement and process.
All right. Good morning, everyone. If we can move on to the next slide, I think, what Cami alluded to is, the mandate is impacting us all in different ways. And while it's clear that, this is a mandate we're going to comply with as an organization, we can also be empathetic to the fact that we're all being impacted in different ways, and that all of our opinions are valid because we all matter individually. And our role in HR is really to operationalize the verification and exemption process, but also to support every single individual, regardless of what decision you make. With that in mind, I think one of the biggest asks we've gotten from people is just more transparency in the exemption and accommodation process. So I wanted to start with that, about providing more information. This is what I'm going to give you is like high-level process. But like Cami mentioned, the chat is there and open, so please feel free to ask any follow-up questions so we can provide like the specific details that you're looking for. So there are two exemption processes that are allowed to, that are available to you all. One is the medical exemption, and the other one is the religious or deeply held spiritual belief exemption. Both of these reasons, you all would need to submit an exemption request, which we in HR would review. If you submitted an exemption request by the initial September 13th deadline that we put out there, you should have already heard back from us yesterday. I did hear about some individuals that didn't hear back, and what it was is the message got caught in the outbox, but we have messaged everyone. So if you have not heard back from us, please email the ESD GP HR COVID response team. We'll put that in the chat so you have it, mailbox to let them know that you haven't heard back, and we will get back to you. If you submitted your request after the September 13th deadline, we are still going to review your request with the same criteria, so you'll still have the same process. We just can't guarantee your entire process will be completed by October 18th. So we will do everything we can to meet that deadline. And the reason why we had that September 13th deadline is because the second part of the process, after we review the exemption, can be a lot more time consuming, because we then have to figure out, if you have an approved exemption to not be vaccinated, can we accommodate you to safely work unvaccinated in your current role? And because the health and safety of our staff has and continues to be our #1 priority, and because both the CDC and the Department of Health data is telling us that staff who are unvaccinated are both more likely to contract the virus, even when masks and distancing protocols are in place, as well as more likely to experience severe reactions to COVID if they contract it, we've made the agency decision that we're not going to provide accommodations for unvaccinated staff to work in the building if their job duties require them to interact with customers or fellow employees. At the same time, we do not want to lose any employees. So if we do determine that we can't accommodate you in your current role, we're going to look for a reassignment option first before we would ever look at separation. And this process can take a while because it's person specific and we need to look at individual options. And so that's why we were asking for that September 13th deadline again. If we move to the next slide, I can talk about the second area that I think people are very curious about is what are the type of notifications that I'm going to get. I see in the chat that people can't hear me. Is that just a person, or can I get in? Okay, other people can hear me. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you submitted an exemption request, one of the first notifications that you'll get if you submitted that exemption request by September 13th is you should have already gotten a notification letting you know if your exemption request was approved or denied. Some of you may have also gotten a notification saying your accommodation was approved or denied. However, if your accommodation, if we weren't able to accommodate you in your current role, you will probably still have a pending request saying we're working with you to try and figure out what an alternative job assignment could look like. So that might be a secondary letter if we weren't able to accommodate you in your current job. If you have not yet verified your vaccination card, or we've determined that we're unable to provide you with an accommodation of any kind, you would also receive a pre-separation notice, and we're starting to send those out this week. This is a notification that can be rescinded at any time if you either provide us with proof of vaccination, or if you provide us with proof of vaccination. And the important thing to note is that we in HR are we're obligated to send out this notification, and we have to do it on a specific timeline. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that everyone gets ample notice so you aren't ever caught off guard. But I also want to acknowledge that it can also come across as uncaring or unaware if you happen to be a person who's in the process of being vaccinated, but you haven't yet received your final dose and you've let us know. Unfortunately, we still need to send out that notification just in case you don't get that second dose. But it's not just as, we can revoke that message at any time if you get that second vaccination. So if you get that and you're in the process, like please know that it's just a mandatory thing we have to send out, and we will pull it back. The final notification that some staff could receive from HR is what we call a separation notice. And we have to send that out at least 14 calendar days in advance. So those will go out on October 4th. And just say that if you're not fully vaccinated by October 18th, then you would be separated. Similarly to the pre-separation notices, if you showed proof of vaccination between October 4th and October 18th, then we would rescind that notification, and so it would go away again. All right, next slide. And like Cami mentioned, everyone in HR plus our leadership team, we're here to support every person as they navigate this new and really emotionally charged environment. So whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, and regardless of whether you choose to be at ESD on October 19th, or if you're going to make the decision to move on from us, we are here to support you in that process. And that support can take many different forms. So for those who have not yet been verified with their status in any way, we would love to talk with you. We want to understand. We want you to know that you matter. I know sometimes it can feel like there's like an ostracization, like you're being ostracized. But just know that if you talk to us in HR, we respect your decision because we know that it's more complicated than any one aspect of the conversation. And if you're willing to talk with us, we'd like to know what your decision is and how you plan to proceed. And the reason for that is because we also need to know how to support the employees who are going to continue to be employed here with ESD after October 18th, and the customers that we serve who will continue to need our services. And I think the best way we can do that is to know, who plans to remain employed here and who plans to move on, so that we can do that contingency planning that Cami mentioned. So, if that being said, if you are planning to move on and you want to share that with us, we'd love to know if you're not yet vaccinated or not yet fully vaccinated, or you are vaccinated, you just still haven't uploaded your card yet and you're waiting to do so. We'd like to know that too, because that just helps us as a business know, what we can expect on October 19th. And then the final slide is that if you are planning to upload your vaccination card and you haven't done so yet, or if you have any questions about COVID or the vaccination mandate or anything in between, this banner right here, all you have to do is click on the banner. It will take you to the website. It will take you to the Q&A. It will take you to the way to upload your vaccination card. And you can find all that information on there, including the HR COVID response team inbox email that you can send. And there are a couple of us in HR who are monitoring that during all business hours to get you a quick response as well. And that is all I have before I pass it off to Mr. Castle.
Thank you, Michaela, for that information. It's really, really important. Really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Phil Castle. I'm the Deputy Commissioner. It's great to be here with you this morning. And I see that we have about 480 people here this morning. That is awesome. These town halls have been going just really great. We've had some really great questions and really appreciate your participation here this morning. We're going to shift gears a little bit. And as Cami mentioned, we received great feedback and comments from last time we did these town halls. And in those comments, there were a couple of topics that quite a few people wanted to know more about. Some of those were, or a couple of those were the strategic plan, the process, and more information about the difference between the new Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and our EO office, or our Equal Opportunity Office. So you probably saw that we sent some updates about the progress on the strategic plan. And you see a little snapshot here on the screen to the right. If you haven't checked it out yet, there's great information about our progress on Inside ESD. Please follow the link there you see on the bottom left, and it'll really talk to you or show you about our progress. And on this page, you'll find updates on our quarterly target reviews, which is a formal business review of the agency's operational and strategic work. The last review was published at the end of July, and we will continue to do these quarterly target reviews and share the results with you all in staff messages. I also want to point out that these reviews are, they are evolving. We are trying to identify the things we should measure and will measure. And as our business changes, so will the things that we measure. We also want to talk about the strategic plan progress in more detail in the next round of all staff meetings. Next slide, please. Another topic folks wanted to know more about is the new Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and how it differs from the Equal Opportunity Office. So our Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is led by Ayanna Coleman. And at a high level, the EDI office focuses on building and maintaining a culture of equity, while the EOO office has a main focus on equitable access to service and compliance with equal opportunity laws. This office is led by Teresa Eckstein. You may have seen some more information go out about that on September 15th in Newsnet. If you missed it, you can read all about it on Inside ESD and review this handy graphic that you see on the right, which really from a high level talks about those differences and some of the overlap. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk to you about the employee engagement survey. This is an annual survey. Some of you probably remember it, and it's really important for us to hear from you about what is going well and also what can be improved. It is what we do with the results of the survey that really matters the most. An engagement team does some data analysis and then problem solving and project implementation to improve engagement. Last year, we focused on recognition, connection, and encouraging better ways of doing things. So the survey is open from October 1st through November 15th this year. That's a little bit unusual. Normally, it's only open for 30 days. This year, we have extended it. Last year's participation rate was 95%. That's right, 95% of the agency responded to the survey last year. That's incredible, especially for a large agency like ours. So I want to encourage you, I want to shoot for that same goal again this year. And even if we can do a little bit better than that, that would be great. Hearing from as many of you as possible is really our goal. Please look for the link in all staff messages and on Inside ESD starting on October 1st. I also want to plug that the survey is anonymous. It's administered by OFM, or the Office of Financial Management, and there are no names associated with the results. Also this year, there'll be an open-ended question with a blank text box that you'll be able to populate. You'll be able to fill in what it is you're looking, any comment you want to make that you want to get to us. This is new. This hasn't happened in many years. So we're really looking forward to getting those great comments. I mentioned the data team that will be doing an analysis. And last year and a couple years before that, the team was comprised of all ESD employees and not just leaders. And if you're interested in joining that team and being part of that work, you can email Marie Burrows, and I'll put her email address in the chat as soon as I'm done here. And you'll have the opportunity, actually make sure you get supervisor approval first, and you'll have the opportunity to participate on that team, which is called, and I'm going to try and get this right, the Employee Engagement Action and Analysis Team, or the EEAAT. So please reach out to Marie and your supervisor if you're interested in participating. And that's all I have. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our great host, Claire.
All right. Thank you, Phil, Cami, and Michaela. That's awesome. So great information. There's a lot of activity in the chat. And so we're going to get to some Q&A. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that were pre-submitted ahead of time. And then we're also pulling questions, as many as we can, out of the chat. Some of them have already been answered, but I'll probably just re-ask a few. I know it's kind of hard to keep track of the stream of Q&A, and we're seeing a few of them come in a couple of times. So I think it'll be good to go over them, even if we've already answered in the chat. So with that, I'm going to start with one of the pre-submitted questions. So this one I think is from Michaela, and it's about vaccines. So it asks, is the 60-day review of exemptions going to have the same criteria each time, or are exemptions going to be looked at differently every 60 days?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when we review every 60 days, what we'll review for is, have the business needs changed. So if we take a look and we say, you know what, the business needs haven't changed, then we would approve for another 60 days and we would use that criteria. But if for some reason the business need has changed, like for example, we approved a person to telework full time because there was no business need for them to come in the office, and then that business need has changed and now they do need to come into the office, that's when we would relook to say, do we need to change the accommodation, and what updates do we need to make? So it's really about the business need.
All right, great, thank you. And so I think I've got a few here for you, Michaela. So if a staff person working virtually loses their internet, we normally have them go to the nearest WorkSource office. So would they need to take vacation time if they can't go to the nearest WorkSource office?
Yeah, so for that example, if a person is unvaccinated and they've been approved to telework as that accommodation to remain unvaccinated, then they would not be allowed to go into the office. So if they lost internet, then they would not be able to do their work. So they would use annual leave to have that cover for that time. I think there is a secondary option if they want to pursue it, and that is that they could also request from their supervisor the ability to use or to flex their schedule to work different hours. And that is something that they and their supervisor could work out if it aligned with the business needs as well.
All right, thank you. So we did get some questions that I think it's been answered in the chat, but I'll just ask you anyway, Michaela, just to reiterate, if someone has not yet received, they've submitted their vaccine verification, but they haven't received an email yet, can you just share like what the expectation is around timing?
Yeah, so it is 5 business days. And if you haven't received notification in 5 business days, then please email the ESD GP COVID response team inbox. We have found a couple of times that messages are getting stuck in the outbox when we send it out. So that has happened a couple of times, but we are reviewing and then sending the email. So it may take a couple of days. That's why we're asking you wait up to 5 days.
Awesome. All right. So we had a question submitted ahead of time about PDFs. So this one's specific to the VA, but I think anyone who needs to submit a PDF instead of an image file would probably be helpful. So they don't have access to an ESD camera or scanner to download the records of their vaccination from the VA in this case, but they do have a PDF of their vaccine documentation. So because it's not an image file, it doesn't work with the form. So what should you do if you don't have something that can be uploaded to the form?
So I had a tech person help me out with this question. I think there are 2 options, and it's kind of first and foremost rooted in, we want to protect the confidentiality of your documents. So please don't send the documents to us in email, because we don't believe that is the most secure way. So that's the preface to it. If you can, and you know how to use the snippet tool, which I was just shown, you can use the snippet tool, which is in your bottom left-hand corner. When you click on that Windows icon, you can see it. You can actually take a snippet of your document and then save that as a JPEG, and then you can upload that. If that is like you and it's like blowing your mind and too much to think of right now, you can also email the ESD GP COVID response team inbox. Just don't email your documents, just email them and let them know what your situation is, and we'll schedule a time with you to set up to be able to do a verification in a secure way.
Awesome. All right. All right, I'm going to have one more for you, Michaela, and then I've got a few I think that'll go over to Cami here. So someone asked that, so what are the guidelines for someone who's requested a religious exemption, but they've sort of shared a lot around the office that they are doing it only because they don't want to get the vaccine? Is there a way to share that information, or what are the guidelines when you feel like somebody's maybe not being entirely honest?
Yeah, thank you for that one. And I think I'll preface my response with just kind of the general statement, or amplifying again what Cami mentioned earlier around this is a really tough time for a lot of people. And I think people process in different ways. So you may have heard your coworkers' frustrations, and that doesn't mean that they don't also have that deeply held spiritual belief. So if someone's frustrated about getting the vaccine, it doesn't negate that they may have a deeply spiritual belief as well. And we do have a process in HR if you believe that someone is being purposefully untruthful in information that they're providing to us. Also, just email the ESD GP HR COVID response team inbox. We would approach it from the same way that we would approach if anyone was violating an ESD policy, where we would engage with that employee, talk with them, look into it, follow what we call just cause, and before we took any action, but we would investigate and look into it.
All right, thanks, Michaela. So I'm going to grab one from the chat here. There were a number of questions earlier about non-perm employees. So Cami, maybe could you talk a little bit about, we've got a lot of non-permanent employees now that have been hired over the course of the pandemic. What can kind of those folks expect around sort of timing for their positions, and is there any advice you can offer if they would like to stay and get a permanent position?
Absolutely. Thanks, Claire. And for those of you that have heard me in the past, you probably have heard my story. And I started my career almost 26 years ago in a 3-month non-perm position with no commitment of any jobs beyond that. What I'll share is that there's a lot of factors that go into what happens with those non-perm positions, and we have them all over the agency, not just in the UI program right now. And so it's hard to say exactly what will happen because some of them are, situational and really dependent on what's happening for that particular position in that division. Generally, a couple things I will say that I hope are helpful overall. One is that the divisions now have their base budgets for the year, so they know what those are and what they have to work with, and that is helpful. And that's what they have to work with right this moment. What we do know is that sometimes the federal funding can change depending on needs. So it is possible that if we have a certain type, like say our reemployment services really spike and there's something that happens in that sphere, it's possible that there could be additional funding. I'm not saying there's more coming. I'm just saying that our federal funding is set for now, but we can see fluctuation in that. The other thing I'll say is that we are also getting just a clearer vision on what some of the work is looking a little bit farther into the future. It's been a little bit challenging to do. My advice personally for people is to keep a really close eye on what's available that's permanent within the agency, and to line those options up with where your skills are and what you're interested in. I'd also talk to your supervisor and manager if you haven't already, and really make sure that they know that you'd love to stay. I'm excited that so many people want to stay here at ESD. That is awesome for us, and certainly we want to retain great talent. And we do have to manage that alongside with what we're funded. But I think there's really good opportunities. I've gotten a question in the past, if I've only been here a few months, is it, should I apply for a permanent job that's different than my job? And I would say you should absolutely apply for any job that, you really think interests you, that you have the passion and the skill for, and put your, throw your hat in the ring and, apply for those positions. But that I think is a really good thing to do, and just really keep your eye out. We've got all kinds of positions that become open for different reasons. Someone may retire, someone may take a job at a different organization. So they change almost every day. So keep your eyes out and don't be afraid to apply for something that you're interested in. And all of our jobs are posted out on careers.wa.gov, and you can sort out on that and filter by agency. So you can bring up all of the positions for Employment Security Department on careers.wa.gov. So check it out. And thank you for being here now and being interested in staying with us. Excited to have such great talent that have joined us.
Absolutely, yeah. We've grown immensely as an agency, and it's been for the better, for sure. That's awesome. All right, so we've got another, we have a series of questions around staffing contingency planning. So maybe, Cammie, can you just talk a little bit about kind of like what's the picture right now around what we know around sort of staff loss, and how are we planning for that?
That's a great question, and I understand where it's coming from. Underline twice that we want to support the team that's staying, and make sure that we understand how to do that. So we have started a cross-agency contingency planning process that's looking at all of the data around our vaccinated levels, and looking both by division and holistically across the agency to try to anticipate what those impacts may be. And I mentioned earlier that if we recognize that there's a key position that's going to be left vacant, we will start on the process to try to cover that position and be ready to do that before the 18th, so that it's not that once the 18th hits, then we're trying to figure out what to do. And I think, for better or for worse, we just went through a lot of effort to try to staff a lot of work when the work really peaked, and we had some creative and innovative solutions alongside hiring. And so that taught us a lot. So I think underpinning that, we're looking at all of those levers and things that we have done in the past, alongside what we think the picture looks like, and being ready, and particularly focusing in on key positions where we might have single points of failure or really dire impacts beyond just not being able to get through our work at the same pace. And that's really where we're starting with it. So great question, and we are certainly planning for that and looking at how we support our teams, not just in workload, but also in coming together as an agency as we move forward through this together, and having another big impact to the agency, and another sort of major new thing that's difficult to navigate, and making sure that we get our teams support in their well-being and in team building and all the places that we know are going to be really important.
Great, thanks, Cammie. So I think I've got a couple more for you, and then I'll probably pass it back to a few more from Akila. So Cami, I think this was answered in the chat earlier, but again, it's sort of fast and furious. So in case you missed it, can you just share if folks should be prepared to share their booster shot verification?
Absolutely. There's no requirement for that right now at all. And so if it were to become required, we would let you know immediately, but there's no requirement, and we would ask that you don't submit that. And right now, there's only one of the 3 vaccines that is approved for a booster, and it is in a very specific area, which is over 65 and up, and those with underlying serious health conditions. So at this point, it is not a requirement or a mandate.
Right. Great. And then we also got a question around customers, and are we requiring customers coming into our offices to provide proof of vaccination?
Not right now. It's not required under the mandate. It's also a decision that would be collective across all of the leadership for our WorkSource centers. As I think most people know, ESD is a partner in those centers. We would work with WBAs if we were going to go that route, and there's not an indication of that right now. We have really worked hard to make those offices as safe as possible, and many of you have probably seen me out in some of those offices. I have been going out just to support the team, and I really like hearing from the team. So those have been really great trips, and I've been really pleased to see as I've gone out, spit guards, things set up really well for social distancing, and a lot of protections that are in place to ensure that our teams stay safe. And I really appreciate the great work that everyone's doing out in our WorkSource Center. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Huge shout out to our WorkSource staff. Many of them have been back in offices for a while, and they're doing some pretty awesome work, especially as folks coming off all these federal benefits. So really appreciate their work. So Michaela, I think I'm going to pass a few questions back to you. We got one earlier in the chat that says, I appreciate the agency trying to find ways to keep staff. However, my understanding as of last week was we've approved every exemption request except a handful that were seeking additional guidance from council. Isn't the point of the mandate to improve the health and welfare of the state by requiring vaccines with limited exceptions? So are we complying with that intent and accommodating and reassigning?
Thank you for that one. That's a tough one, Matt. And I think our agency has 2 goals. One is to maintain the health and safety of our staff, and then the second is to comply with the mandate. And part of the mandate and part of our federal labor laws is to allow staff to seek an exemption if they have either a medical reason or a deeply held spiritual belief reason to not obtain the vaccination. And we put that September 13th deadline out there because we really wanted to make sure that we could get through them all in time so that we could have an answer back to staff by the 18th. Staff can technically submit a request, so any of you could submit a request through the 18th, but if we're still in the process, you would need to take leave or use leave without pay during that additional time frame past the 18th while we're assessing. I would also add that, as an agency that values equity, diversity, and inclusion, we also want to make sure that those options are always available to staff who may need them. And because we also prioritize health and safety, that is why we're making sure that any staff with an approved exemption, we would look for an accommodation that doesn't compromise or doesn't put anyone's health at risk. And that's why, and just to clarify again, because I think that can be really confusing, is when staff, there's 2 parts to the process. Staff submit for the exemption. We review by the laws that we're governed by to say, does this exemption meet the requirement to be approved or denied? If it's approved, then we look to accommodate and say, can we accommodate in a way that does not compromise the health and safety of our staff? And that's why our main accommodation that we're looking for right now is job duties that allow them to telework full time. But it is a difficult process. So I appreciate you kind of calling that out, and just know that we're continuing to navigate this really new world that we're still trying to figure out as since there is no like labor law that sets out, or case law that sets out what we should do.
Right. Thanks, Michaela. Also got a question that said, I submitted a few questions. I submitted my vaccine proof upon being hired. Is a second submittal necessary?
It depends. I think if you got an email confirmation saying, yes, that's what you're confirmed, then you're good to go. If there are some places that are just doing a quick visual verification, since we want to make sure that we don't bring you on board and then realize we can't accommodate you. If you did just a quick visual verification, we may follow up with you afterwards to get a copy into your medical file. So we will reach out to you if we haven't yet confirmed that we've gotten your full verification done.
All right, awesome. And then I think I've got one more for you. Actually, I'll do two more because one was submitted ahead of time. So one was submitted ahead of time. This has nothing to do with vaccines, but I want to make sure that person gets their question answered. They asked about what's our policy around hiring staff from out of state, particularly non-neighboring states. Do we have sort of policies, regulations around that?
Yeah, and so the Office of Financial Management State HR Division, which handles kind of the statewide HR policy for all state agencies, just recently released guidance on this, which I am excited about because it's been a conversation we've been asking for, to say, how do we support people to telework outside of the state? And we'll email, or we'll put a link to where you can find that full guidance in the chat. But the high level overview is that overall, we do not support anyone to telework from outside of the state. And we do have some exceptions where we will allow that. One exception is for people who are in hard to fill positions. So if we can't do the recruitment and retention here in Washington state and find great candidates, then we can hire someone from outside of the state. The second one is for military spouses. So if you are a military spouse and your spouse gets PCS to another state and you want to remain employed with ESD while you move with your spouse, we can support that. And then the third one is to care for a family member. So if you need to leave the state temporarily to care for a family member, we can also support that. And because I'm a huge believer in also providing the why to answers, I also just want to do a quick follow-up of, there are a couple of reasons why there was that policy decision to not support broad-based telework, which may be counterintuitive since it seems like we've proven that we can work from anywhere. And I think the main reason is we have plenty of qualified, great people here in Washington state. And because the state is the largest employer in the state, we also want to support kind of the economic vitality and community wellness of our own state. We want to encourage and continue to ensure that our taxpayer dollars that go to our state salaries stay in the state of Washington to reinvest in our state, which is why we're not supporting kind of broad-based telework outside of the state.
All right. Yes, I see Catherine in the chat there saying she wants to work from Cabo, and yeah, I think that sounds pretty good to me right now. All this rain coming down, so. All right, so one more for you, Michaela, and then I'm gonna pass a few more off to Cami here. So we had a question, I think earlier and definitely yesterday. So for folks that haven't received their first shot, or have received their first shot by the 18th, but not the second, what's sort of the pathway for them? And then maybe could you talk a little bit about sort of leave or leave without pay for the ones that have a gap in that period of being fully vaccinated?
I'm so sorry, I got distracted by a question in the chat. Can you repeat the first part of the question? Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. I know there's a lot going on. It makes it really fun to do the chat but it also is like there's good chatter going on. No, so the question is kind of two-part. If you have received your first shot by the 18th, but not your second, or you're still in that 2-week window by the 18th, what is the sort of situation for you? Is there anything you need to do about that? And then if you could just talk a little bit about leave and leave without pay for those who are in that gap of being fully vaccinated, what they should expect or guidelines around that.
Thank you. And it really depends on the unique situation. So what I'd say is I'll give you some broad-based information of how we look at it, but if that you're in that situation, I would really encourage you to reach out through the ESD GP HR COVID response team inbox with your specific situation so that we can work with you to get you like kind of your unique guidance. But in general, there's kind of two ways. Like if you are not fully vaccinated by the 18th and it was because you submitted for an exemption request and during that exemption request you were denied in some way. So either we denied your original exemption or we told you we can't accommodate you. If you were in that process, you got a denial letter and then you said, you know what, I'm going to choose to go get vaccinated, I'm going right now, then the way that we have the agreement with the union is that you can use your leave, so annual leave, to be able to fill in. You would not be able to work between the 19th of October and the time frame that you were fully vaccinated, but you would be able to use leave to supplement until that time. If you are not fully vaccinated right now and you weren't going through the exemption process, or you just opted to go get vaccinated and dropped out of the exemption process, then the way that the agreement is currently written is that you would have to take leave without pay for the time between October 19th and when you were fully vaccinated. And so that's why it really is kind of case by case specific. So I would say talk with us if that's you, and we will work with you to try and get you the best way we can, with the goal that our desire is to keep you employed with us here at ESD.
All right, great. So I'll pass this off to Cami, but we had a follow-up, I think, from the out-of-state question, and it was asking if it's possible to take a working vacation out of state, maybe for a few weeks or a month. Do you know that one?
So first of all, I recommend that you vacation without working, but that's a totally separate issue. And I'm guilty sometimes of not doing that well. That's why I'm throwing it out there. There are sometimes that people need to be out of state. Maybe maybe there's someone in their family that they're caring for, or there is a trip that they need to take. On a limited basis, you can work from another state temporarily. I think the bottom line would be that you would have to be equipped to be able to do that and have what you need to perform your job, and work with your supervisor on that. But generally, if that is structured right, it would be sort of transparent in terms of you being able to perform your job, and for a limited time you would be able to do that. And I would invite our HR expert, Michaela, to weigh in if she sees any other considerations for that besides having all the equipment, having it be temporary, and working with your supervisor.
Thank you. Yeah, HR is like, oh, the dark clouds sometimes. What I would say is also, if you're planning on leaving the country, or if you work with federal tax information, there are certain job duties and certain locations that we would really want to run it by IT security. So when you talk with your supervisor, one of our guidance that we share with leaders is please make sure you run any out-of-state or out-of-country work through IT security so they can assess to make sure it is we're keeping our data and our state information safe when we're doing that work. And I would just also really echo Cami's response around, like, please take your vacations. As someone who has worked through many vacations, I can tell you it's not fun, and you come back like not nearly as refreshed. And the times where I have taken my vacations, I am so much better because of it. So please feel free to take those vacations because you've earned them.
Awesome. All right, thank you. So Cami, we had gotten some questions around sort of office reopenings, what to expect for ESD offices. I know obviously some folks have maintained working, this whole time in the offices. And then of course our workforce staff, many of them have gone back. But can you just talk a little bit about sort of where we're at with building reopenings?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I know it's on people's mind. I sent an email not that long ago in which I said there's not any magic date, and I'm not going to give a date because it's not really about when, but what the circumstances would be that would allow us broader occupation of our offices. And within that, one of the things that I really tried to make clear is we are not assuming that everyone's just going to go pouring back to the office. And in fact, we want to be able to offer a variety of work options depending on your work and your performance and ability to serve customers. And so what that message said was, one, all of our buildings have to be ready for us to return. And we started with the priority of our workforce centers, and that included all of the safety measures that I talked about. And so there is a status, and I can put it in the chat in a minute, out on our website with where each building sort of at in that process. The second thing was broader population of folks that aren't already building dependent would happen after we got through the vaccine mandate, and that people really need to work with their supervisors and managers on what their intention, what they would like, what their intention for their work might be, so that we can prepare some of those spaces to make sure that they're ready. And so, those things sort of all came together in that email. And I think, I would start having those conversations. And again, the ability to work fully remote or work hybrid or work all in the building should be options or some variation in, as long as you can perform your work in that way. So if you are someone like me, like I will have some kind of hybrid work option, some in the office, some not. I need to be able to fully perform my work. I need to be able to serve my customers. And if all of those things are true, then I should be able to do that. And my team, my supervisor, my manager needs to know what I'm going to do so that our space can be prepared to accommodate whether we need drop-in spaces, whether we need, dedicated spaces, sort of what all of those things are. And so I did see in the chat, someone said, well, I answered a survey a long time ago and I've changed my mind, and that's okay. Like, that survey about space didn't lock anybody into a particular thing. And starting those conversations are really important. And we have some divisions that have started to prepare for that return, broader return, and that's what will happen. But I just want to be clear, there's no like, all right, everyone back to the building. That's not how this will work. And even, in our workforce centers, there is a variety of how that work is delivered, both through virtual means and through on-site services. And so it's really working with your teams to figure out, and your supervisors and managers, what's going to be best. And then we can send back out those criteria that we had around when a building would be ready, and what the considerations are. Hopefully that helps.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Cami. So I am going to ask one that came in a lot yesterday and was pre-submitted as well. And it's not about vaccines, but it is about news that's coming out around a government, possible federal government shutdown. This sort of it's been in the news, but nothing is firm. So can you just kind of fill us in on what that is, Cami, and how it would affect ESD should it happen? And I don't know, do we have any expectations around that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It has become the norm that instead of passing a budget, Congress gets down to the wire and there's a looming federal shutdown. They are working on a continuing resolution for the budget. That shutdown would happen if they fail to reach a deal. But there's a lot of things that have to happen before that would actually be a reality. We will absolutely communicate with you in advance. We have been in close contact with OFM and the governor's DC office. And at this point, they are not seeing a massive risk that there would be a major shutdown, but we will communicate as we get closer and if this becomes more of a reality. And definitely we have contingency plans. This has been an exercise because so often there is potential for it, that we have gone through this exercise many times without a shutdown, and we'll just dust off those same plans.
Right. Well, that was awesome questions. Thank you, everyone. I didn't realize we are at time now. So before we go, Cammie, did you want to say any sort of last words?
Absolutely. I just want to thank you all again for being here. I am so proud and appreciate our team so much. I often get asked, like, how, you know, from people that don't work at ESD, like, your job must be crazy. Why would you do that job? And I feel like I won the lottery with this job because of all of you. We have just an impressive team. I hope that that as many of you as possible continue on with this great work and at ESD, because we value you and we're really fortunate to have you. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great day and a great rest of your week. Take care.